This is Brian. Thank you, Ron. As Ron said, this is the Board of Trustees meeting for Woodlands Water for Wednesday, May the 12th, 2021. We appreciate everyone being able to attend our remote meeting this evening. As in prior meetings, I'll briefly go through the remote meeting procedures and then we'll perform a roll call. So to begin with, I need to remind everyone the meeting is being recorded as required by the Texas Open Meetings Act. Second, please remember to state your name before you speak. When you're not speaking, please be sure to mute your line. Third, we'll continue the practice of having a roll call to vote on each motion. After a motion has been made and seconded, please wait until you hear your name called and then respond with a verbal aye, a nay, or an abstention. Finally, we need to identify each person who's joining the meeting remotely this evening so that we can accurately reflect the attendance in the minutes of the meeting. I'll perform a roll call for the board members, followed by staff and consultants. When you hear your name or your company called, please respond by indicating that you're present in the meeting. Likewise, if you need to leave the meeting before it adjourns, please announce that you're doing so before you disconnect. Once I've completed the roll call for directors, staff, and consultants, I'll ask for any members of the public to identify themselves for the record. So starting with our Board of Trustees, Eric Hurd, absent. Do we have an alternate attending for MUD 39 this evening? That does not sound like it. Okay, so we'll move on then. Ron Wilson, Metro MUD.
Here. Present.
Kyle Mays, MUD 7. Paul Martin, MUD 67.
Present.
Hartley McIntosh, MUD 1.
Present.
Ron Cucci, MUD 6.
Present.
Dan Price, MUD 36.
Present.
Scott Custer, MUD 46.
Present.
Laura Norton, MUD 47.
Here.
Bob Lux, MUD 60.
Present.
Okay, that completes the roll call for our Board of Trustees. We do have a quorum of the board present attending that meeting this evening. We'll move on now to Woodlands Water staff. Jim Stinson.
Present.
Mike Mooney.
Present.
Shelley Lawson Kennedy.
Present.
Maureen Bourgeois.
Present.
Jeannie Scott.
Present.
Any other members of Woodlands Water that I have not called? Okay, we'll move on to San Jacinto River Authority staff. Ron Kelly.
Present.
Ed Shackelford.
Present.
Chris Meeks.
Present.
Matt Corley.
Present.
Any other members of the River Authority present in the meeting?
Matt
Heather-
Ball is here.
And Heather Cook is here.
William Peterson is here.
Okay, I heard Aaron Schindlerwolf and then William Peterson with the River Authority. Anyone else from the River Authority? Okay, if not, we will move on to district consultants. Do we have any district consultants present or trustee, Board of Trustee consultants for Woodlands Water present in the meeting? Okay, if there are no Woodlands Water consultants in the meeting, we will move on to members of the public. Do we have any members of the public present in the meeting? We need to identify you for the record as well. If you could just go one at a time, and if you're a resident, if you could name the MUD that you are affiliated with.
Paul Brown, MUD 47. I'm also a director.
John Yours, MUD 36.
Neil Gaynor, MUD 6.
This is George Newman from MUD 46.
Arthur Breedoff, associated with MUD 47, live in the district and a resident and ratepayer.
Gary Miller, MUD 60.
Lance McLeod, Kimley Horn.
Stephanie Zertuche, Mud 7.
Chris Honiford, V&A Consulting Engineers.
Dr. Shelley Sakula Gibbs, the Woodlands Township Board Director and I live in Mud 6, and I serve on One Water.
Dan Colcourse is attending with Howard Hughes Corp.
This is Brian. Do we have any other members of the public present in the meeting that has not yet been identified? Maureen, does that cover everyone who appears to be logged into the meeting?
This is Maureen. I've got Chris Clements, Leslie Child, and Mark Unland.
Leslie Child here, Mud 6.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm Chris
Okay,
with the River Authority. I couldn't get my mic to work earlier.
Okay, sorry, could you repeat the name, please?
Chris Clements with the San Jacinto River Authority.
Okay, all right, thank you. I think that covers everyone. We had a couple of folks that Maureen identified that did not identify themselves, but I think other than that, we have covered everyone on the roll call. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Ron to begin the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Let me ask Scott Custer to declare to lead us in the invocation and the pledges. Would you please, Scott?
Sure, just a second. It's in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Lord, we thank you for this gift. We thank you for the gift of faith. We thank you for the gift of this community, Lord. And we thank you for the gift of these individuals, both public and on this board and staff members, Lord. We ask you to guide our discussions today. They be in line with your will, your holy will. And we ask that you send your Holy Spirit upon us and guide us accordingly, Lord. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Holy Spirit, amen.
Okay, to the U.S. flag, please.
Yep. I pledge allegiance. Excuse me just a second.
What? Okay.
Make sure I don't want to get it wrong.
Haven't been in school for a while, huh?
No. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Scott. We now come to item 3 of the meeting, which is to receive comments from the public. So please introduce yourself, get recognized, and then we get started.
Hi, this is Paul Brown. First, I'd like to start by saying thank you to the board for putting an agenda item on for tonight to discuss federal funding of infrastructure, an item that I suggested in the last meeting we get on board with. Second, I wanted to make a comment about, again, about infrastructure funding in the budget. I believe needs to be multi-year, a separate queue, rolling additions to the queue, separate breakout of the on the customer bill, like the GRP, so our customers know where they're where this percentage of expenses is being paid. The next item, a few years back, I recommended that we embrace a technology vulnerability audit separate from our financial audit. It was done for 1 year, and my understanding is that this board allowed that requirement to lapse. I'm recommending that it quickly be reinstated and we get it done. If we haven't learned anything now from Colonial, we ought to learn something. And then finally, on our budget, okay, and on the mix of water that this organization endorses, I think the board really needs to get out and endorse a 50-50 surface water to groundwater mix for the next budget cycle, so that we get public and we endorse that kind of expenditure, and we recognize that water is not going to get cheaper, okay? Between the infrastructure expenditures that we're going to have, as well as, prepping ourselves in a way to, support the aquifers, it's just not going to get cheaper. We need to step up and do what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Anybody else?
Sure. This is George Newman from Mud 46. I wanted to take a minute to thank the Board of Trustees for considering this proposed resolution on the DFCs. In the last month, I've seen many mud directors work many hours on this DFC. The result is 1.5 pages of text, but every sentence in it has been evaluated for impact and checked for accuracy. I wanted to recommend its approval as a written response to the various statements of the Lone Star Groundwater Conservation District, and hope that all the muds in the Woodlands agree. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Anybody else?
Yes, thank you, Vice President Wilson and the board. This is Neil Gaynor, President of Mud 6. I wish to make comment in support of the resolution in Agenda Item 9. As water at unsustainable rates will deplete a critical resource and induce land surface changes due to subsidence and possible activation of fault systems. Depletion occurs because of relatively low recharge rates to our aquifers. Subsidence and fault activation are related to compaction of fine-grained clay layers due to pressure reduction within the aquifers. In Montgomery County, elevation records of GPS stations indicate our aquifers are sensitive to pressure reduction by pumping groundwater, with changes in subsidence rates closely connected to withdrawal rates. The resolution on desired future conditions is a clear statement of the importance of sustainable groundwater management to avoid impacts of irreversible subsidence, such as fault activation and changes in surface drainage leading to flooding. I want to express my strong support of this resolution and anticipate a unanimous vote in favor by the Board of Trustees. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Neil. Any additional comments?
Ron Wilson, Arthur Bredehoff. Thanks for the time, sir. I see we got a great agenda tonight on various items that impact water. As you know, I've been at the meeting a number of times talking about the blend ratio of surface water to groundwater. I was surprised to see in the budget, which is item 15 that's going to be presented tonight, not an option B on a 50-50, so we could compare what the cost would be on a 50-50 surface water to groundwater. The budget that's going to be presented tonight is a 35% surface water and a 65% groundwater. If it's not talked about tonight 50-50, I would ask the trustees to have placed on the June agenda an option B that presents the 50-50 groundwater surface water, so that the residents and the directors can see what the impact will be on cost. Because as Director Brown mentioned, water is not going to get cheaper. So I'd ask the board to really take a serious look at 50-50, because it's a positive step forward that will definitely impact aquifer and mitigate subsidence. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Arthur. Additional comments?
Chairman?
Yes.
This is Dr. Shelley Sakula Gibbs, and I'm here to basically monitor what's going on with the Woodlands Water Agency and the Board of Trustees and learn as much as I can and be supportive of whatever is done in terms of benefiting the residents of the Woodlands. I have a particular interest in the agenda item 17, which is receive, consider, and act upon SJRA Woodlands Wastewater Treatment Facility #1 improvements. And I, as an individual, not as a board member, I hope that that this action is taken tonight. And of course, reiterate that subsidence is a serious matter and look forward to seeing what the Board of Trustees does on that action as well, if any action is taken tonight.
Thank you. Additional comments? Okay, let's move on then to item 4, 5, and 6, the consent agenda. Brian, what do we do, Brian, on the consent agenda?
This is Brian. So under the consent agenda, we would hear from any directors as to whether they would like to remove any of the 3 items from the consent agenda. If there are no requests to remove an item from the consent agenda, we can consider a motion to approve the items for action under that consent agenda.
Okay, thank you. So question number 1 then is, are there any directors, trustees who have an objection to or would like to comment separately on any of the items on the consent agenda?
This is Trustee Martin. I'd like to comment on item 5, please.
Okay. Does it change anything? Well, let's go ahead and make a comment, Paul.
On page 10 of your package, there was just a transposition or carry forward typo error on the cash balances. Those corrections have been made by Maureen, and the effective changes are on page 10 and page 12. And I understand that Maureen has already sent those forward.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Any other comments on the 3 items?
Yes, President Hurd. This is Trustee Lux. I have a question regarding the SJRA facility. I noticed that on page number 2 of our agenda packet, page number 17, I noticed that at wastewater treatment facility number 3, the peak flow was is permitted at 3.9. I believe that's MGD, and it came in at 5.19. Does this indicate that I view that as kind of a portable or a pre-assembled treatment plant? Is that at overcapacity now? And does this roll into another aspect of our amalgamation of all 3 of the treatment plants? This, I guess, would be for Chris.
So this is Chris Meeks, and yes and no. That was an anomaly this month between just various process operations and rainfall that hit around the same time and flowed through the system. If you look back through history at Wastewater Plant 3, the flow never gets that high. Even during Harvey, we didn't bust the 2-hour peak that you're looking at. So that was just an anomaly for this point in time.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, unless there's other questions, I think we probably considered the 2 or 3 differences of opinion on these, and so I think we can move, Brian, for a movement for the consent agenda.
This is Brian, that's correct.
This is Trustee Lux. I move that the consent agenda be approved as submitted.
Second by Norton.
Thank you. Would call roll.
This is Brian. Any other discussion on the motion and second regarding the consent agenda? If not, we will call the vote. Ron Wilson, how do you vote?
Aye.
Kyle Mays,
Aye.
Paul Martin,
Aye.
Hartley McIntosh,
Aye.
Ron Cucci,
Aye.
Jan Price,
Aye.
Scott Custer,
Aye.
Laura Norton,
Aye.
Bob Lux,
Aye.
motion carries.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Move on to item 7, receive an update on GMA 14 Joint Planning Committee. Who's going to give that update, Jim?
Ron Kelly, would you help us with that one, please?
Yeah, absolutely. As you know, the DFC, the proposed DFC is out for its 90-day comment period. Based on last night's Lone Star Groundwater Conservation District board meeting, they plan on having their public hearing on either June 7th, 8th, or 9th. And they will let us know about that. And they are expecting an extensive amount of comments. And they even talked about last night of setting an entire day for the public hearing. That hearing will be important for people to show up, probably via virtually, and provide both written comments and verbal comments. And then the GMA 14 meeting where the DFCs will be voted on is currently scheduled for October the 6th. That date may change, but that's the current date. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I would like to add to that. There's a group called StopOurSinking.com, and their sole objective is to get people to make comments to the Lone Star Board.
Great. Very good. Anything else, Jim?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if that's finishes that subject, we'll move on to item 8, the attorney's report. Brian?
This is Brian. Not a whole lot to report of a general nature under the attorney's report. We are barreling toward the end of the legislative session. A lot going on there right now. We'll have a more complete picture in the next few weeks to be able to provide y'all with a good summary on what all is going to be impacting us coming out of this session. But at this point, we're really in the throes of bills going through committee hearings and trying to get votes on the floor. So more to come. That's all I have of a general nature. I think Jim's probably going to report on our application to Texas Water Development Board on behalf of Mud 67. So I'll go ahead and leave that to him under the GM report. Happy to answer any questions y'all may have.
Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item 9. Consider an act on resolution regarding desired future conditions. Who owns this one, Jim?
This was placed on the agenda at the request of Trustee Lux, and I know Trustee Norton also played a role. So Bob or Laura, would y'all like to make some opening remarks on this item?
Well,
Yes.
there were, sure, go ahead.
I'm ready to go. If you are, Laura.
Go for it, Bob.
Pardon me?
Go for it.
Okay, thank you. This resolution is a starting point in our attempt to turn the past several year trend at Lone Star Groundwater Conservation District around. Many residents and board directors are of the opinion that the Lone Star Groundwater Conservation District is going the wrong way, going in the wrong direction, and irreversible harm will result throughout the region. The purpose of this resolution, originally drafted by Bob Lilac, president of MUD 1, and George Newman, MUD 46, was presented at the March MUD meetings. Most MUDs in one way or another did not act on that resolution's first draft. Then a group of directors from various MUDs, MUD 1, MUD 6, MUD 36, MUD 46, MUD 47, and MUD 60, along with Woodlands Water Agency, General Manager Stinson, legal counsel Brian Yates, and numerous others provided input, review, and comment in producing the resolution we bring to you today. I have a few requests of you today, 4 asks, if you will. The first is to approve this resolution, hopefully unanimously, and forward it from the Board of Trustees to the LSGCD. Number 2, include an agenda item on each of your upcoming MUD meetings to consider and act on this resolution as it has been included in our agenda this evening. Number 3, in your discussions, request that each MUD submit a copy of the resolution under your MUD's name to LSGCD. And finally, request number 4, during discussions, request that each director assist in outreach to directors of non-Woodlands Water Agency MUDs, public officials, residents, and others in either joining the resolution or providing comments to LSGCD. Visit www.stopOurSinking.com for additional information. I will attempt to answer any questions you may have at this time, or I will gladly yield the floor to Trustee Norton.
That was well done, Bob. Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Lux.
Hearing no questions as of yet, unless someone is contemplating a question, I make a motion to approve the resolution as submitted, and upon approval, forward the completed resolution to the Lone Star Groundwater Conservation District.
I'll second that motion.
We got a motion and second. Do we have any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, like a roll call vote, Brian.
This is Brian. If there's no further discussion, we'll call the vote. Ron Wilson, how do you vote?
Aye.
Kyle Mays,
Aye.
Paul Martin,
Aye.
Hartley McIntosh,
Aye.
Ron Cucci,
Aye.
Jan Price,
Aye.
Scott Custer,
Aye.
Laura Norton,
Aye.
Bob Lux.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, I have a question, Bob. Your motion was simply for this board to sign this thing. You had 3 other requests.
That is correct.
Brian, is there something the board could do or should do tonight to embellish or to encourage Bob's other requests be met?
This is Brian. As far as the placement of the item on the individual MUD agendas, that could be made by each of the trustees to Jim to put that on agendas for next week. That doesn't have to be handled as part of this meeting. That can be done offline as MUD business. Bob, I don't know if there were any other items related to this that you would be seeking action from the trustees tonight.
Merely their vocal support in when the resolution is brought before the board, and their request that each of their fellow directors kind of pitch in, because at the moment we need all the help we can get to get the message out to contact friends, colleagues, people that you've known, met at AWBD meetings. The network that each of the directors has needs to be exercised in order to gain full access of this resolution and the message that we're trying to bring. We can't do it alone.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to item 10, which I believe belongs to Mr. Stinson regarding discussion regarding consultant.
Brian, did you have a comment?
This is Brian. No, I didn't say anything.
Okay, sorry. Yes, item number 10 was requested to be placed on the agenda for discussion tonight. I will tell you there is quite a lot of buzz in the engineering industry, the public works industry, the waterworks industry regarding this bill and the potential for funding assistance for projects. At this point, as we know, the bill hasn't passed. I don't have a consultant tonight to recommend that we utilize, but I'm certainly support continuing to explore this topic and see what professionals out there could assist us with ensuring that we are eligible for some of this money from the federal government. And with that brief introduction, I'll open it up to the trustees for discussion.
Jim, my first question, Paul, if you're still around, would you set me straight? Is this a portion of the legislation that was passed, or is this still working its way through the Senate to get for presentation to the House?
As I understand it, this is still working its way through the legislative process. My suggestion that we get out in front of this clearly is one way or the other, my gut is they're going to pass this thing. Okay, and we need to be positioned to step in, be as far to the front of the line as we possibly can to advantage our MUDs and our community with funding for infrastructure. You know, this is an opportunity that doesn't come around very often. It's kind of like the 2.6% interest rates on mortgages, and we'd be foolish not to step up. And I'm kind of concerned that we haven't talked to consultants yet if we have that intent. I mean, we don't need to wait for somebody to pass a bill to start our investigation. This is what holds us back as an organization constantly, it seems to me. Constantly, we're not out in front of these things. So for what it's worth, guys.
Paul, the concept, I'm with you 100%. The only thing that I would question is out in front of what? We don't even know what we're going to be ahead of, and we don't know what the process is going to be.
You're absolutely right. But there are consultants out there who specialize in this kind of work, just like there are doctors out there who'll take care of your whatever problem you have. We've got consultants out there who will talk to us because they want to work for us and get paid by us to try and advantage us. And we really need to get out in front of it, because I guarantee you that other MUDs, other communities around the country are going to be there getting in line. I also quickly saw a headline today from, I believe it was the AWBD, which indicated that they expected MUDs to be eligible for some of this money. And so I would say, we should go back to our office and call some consultants.
Paul, are you really asking more that we receive RFQ responses or resolutions of qualifications? Because you're not suggesting we retain someone at this time, are you?
Yeah, I'm absolutely recommending that we find out who are these eligible contractors and start talking to them and finding out how do they do business? What are their expectations, et cetera, so that if we need to do an RFQ, and I don't know whether it's required, okay, that's up to Jim. He would know better than me and our lawyers. But at the end of the day, you know, it's kind of like you want to be ready to run on the course when the coach says, get in there. And that's really where I'm coming from, because if we're behind the 8 ball on this thing and we're at the end of the line, we're not going to see any funding, even if it was available.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
Jim, do you think there's anything additional you can call, additional folks you can call?
Yes, absolutely. We will keep this ball rolling, reach out to professionals in this arena and report next month, you know, try to get ahead of it and do what we can to make sure we don't miss any opportunities. So.
Yeah, this is Trustee Custer. You know, I understand the sentiment. I appreciate the public comment on that. The, you know, I would encourage you, Jim, and staff to understand how we might staff the effort of internalizing a bill that hasn't passed yet. But once it does, I'm sure there will be distinct direction. And I would look for us to staff that effort internally. I would not want to reach out to a consultant, as that sets an interesting precedent where would we stop? There might be other bills and other efforts from a government perspective that we have to staff. So if that bill comes out and it's very clear that it's beyond the expertise of your staff, it would be in that scenario where you may gain my support for a consultant. I certainly don't want to see one taken in now. I certainly understand where Mr. Brown's coming from in terms of ensuring that we're in place there. And it'll be critical. I think everybody will agree it would be critical to maximize the value that this board does receive, that this community does receive. But in anticipation of the need of a consultant, just, you know, cart before the horse.
I firmly believe that this could really help us in our consolidation of our wastewater treatment plant if wastewater is under this umbrella, which is identified as a water plant. Do you know, Paul, is wastewater also in that?
I don't, yeah, absolutely. Wastewater is defined within the confines of, quote, water.
Okay.
Okay.
I think this would be an excellent opportunity to gain some much needed funding for that massive undertaking.
Yeah, you know, the problem is that, or the issue is, to Mr. Custer's comment, we already know we don't have people on staff to do this. And so it would be logical to pick up a consultant. Having worked in industry for 50 years of my life, if you don't have the expertise, you go out and buy the expertise. And that's really what we should be doing here. As an organization, we need to get used to doing that. We need to stop thinking in terms of thinking small, and we need to start thinking big. You know, the fact of the matter is that, you know, even on another issue that I just raised, we have thought small, and that's vulnerability. Okay. You acted on my initiative and my suggestion in my last term here, and we did one report which found problems in this organization. And then the board said, I assume that it's not important enough or it's too expensive or whatever. And we just saw what's happening with Colonial on the east side of America. So, you know, I like to bring my business experience to this role in this community. Thank you.
Okay, gentlemen, I suggest we leave this on for the agenda for next time, and let's move on to item 12, which is the update on the subsidence and groundwater research consortium.
Actually, we would be at number 11, which is the general manager report.
Oh, sorry, Jim.
That's okay. I've
General
just
manager's report.
a couple of things to highlight. Most of the information that I'll be covering is agenda items after number 11. But I wanted to bring your attention to two very nice compliment emails regarding our staff in your packet. I also wanted to bring to your attention that we have a request from the Woodlands Township Environmental Division to support volunteer efforts and desires to put markers on storm drains in the community. These markers are utilized to minimize pollutants going into the storm drains. We have participated in this effort over the years with a number of Boy Scout or Girl Scout volunteer groups and others. But we're hearing from the township that there is a large request for this type of public service. And that what I'm going to be discussing at the MUD meetings next week is to consider appropriating funds to purchase the markers and the glue and have those available as volunteers come forward, either through our office or the township office, that want to do place these markers in the neighborhoods that we support that. So you'll hear more about that at the MUD meetings next week. And I was interested if Dr. Gaynor is still on the line here regarding the San Jacinto Regional Flood Planning Executive Committee meeting last week. How did that go? I haven't had a chance to find out. I know our MUD supported you in that effort. Can you give us a briefing on that, Neil?
Yeah, sure, Jim. This is Neil Gaynor speaking. Okay, the executive committee met and brought to everyone's attention that there are 6 applicants for the upper watershed voting position, which was a little bit of a surprise since they start with 0 not so long ago. I have no idea who the other people are, but they deferred action in consideration of the applicants, preferring to go to an interview process starting, I believe, next month at the next executive committee meeting. So that's the status. It's in abeyance, shall we say, for the time being, until those interviews are completed and a recommendation is made to the full board of the planning group.
You know, the Woodlands, I was going to say that in months past, we had Dr. Shelley Sekula Gibbs and Penny Bradshaw and Glenna Sloan, all friends, people that wanted the best for the Woodlands, and they all spoke at least once in public open comment to the Regional Flood Planning Board just to get the upper watershed seat. So now that you can appreciate, then what we're looking at now is a seat that we all fought for that could potentially be filled by one of these other 5 people. So we need to call in again and support our candidate, Neil Gaynor. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Neil. And that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Now we'll move on to item 12.
Yes, sir. Item 12 is the update on the Regional Subsidence and Groundwater Research Consortium. I have that written report. We did not get it in time to go in the trustee packet, but it will be included in each of the MUD meeting packets next week.
Okay. This is Trustee Guzzler. Are there any critical highlights that you wanted to point out here tonight, or just wait till the meetings next week?
No, sir. Nothing to point out tonight. We'll have it in the document next week. And if you have questions about any of the items, we'll go through them then. But nothing to highlight tonight.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Now we'll move on to item 14, staff updates on Resto. I assume that's Mike. Booney's job?
Well, it'll be a combination between Mike and I. First thing I'm going to do is just bring your attention to the document from Amoresco in your packet regarding the portion of this that I've been working on, which is looking at options for relocating 2 poles, one in the area of Lake Woodlands Drive and Woodlands Parkway, and the other in the Slash Pine neighborhood. I've got additional information from Amoresco on cost for relocating those poles. Again, I'm not requesting any action tonight. This is just information, an FYI update. I'm still needing to get feedback from the Woodlands Township staff and to see if the locations that were identified by our consultant and our staff in the park sites is something that is workable for them. So again, I hope optimistically to have a metric or a matrix set up with options for you and the board members to look at and possibly take action on next month.
This is Trustee Custer. Will that matrix include what I thought was option 1 or 3 maybe, which is just paint?
Yes,
Okay.
that is an option that we looked at as well, the cost for that.
Does painting it cause any loss of coverage, I wonder? Or do we know?
No, it does not.
Okay.
Okay, we'll move on to item 14, staff update on SJRA application for additional funding and engineering.
For the Spring Creek funding, that application, as you know, was approved a while back. The interlocal agreements have been signed. The interview and the selection of a consultant to continue the study of installing detention dams upstream of the Woodlands along Spring Creek is moving forward. We have quite a few partners in that. If you may remember, it's Harris County Flood Control District, the City of Humble, MUD 386, and 4 of our MUDs, MUDs 1, MUD 60, MUD 46, and MUD 7. So that is moving along well, and I'm happy to report regarding the Bear Branch Research Forest Drainage Improvement Concept. That application was approved by the Texas Water Development Board for funding assistance. We have out of the estimated $11 million project cost for that, we have a grant of a little over $1 million and an interest-free 30-year loan for the remainder. Just as a reminder, MUD 67 has carried the lead in getting this application through the development board. I think it's my opinion and others that this is truly a community benefit that goes beyond MUD 67 with research forest being opened up during major storm events where before it has been completely closed. I did submit a drawing. I don't remember if it's in this packet, but I know I presented at the MUD 47 last month that shows some significant benefits to some neighborhoods in MUD 47. Of course, we know the benefits to the neighborhoods in MUD 46. And there's also significant benefits to neighborhoods in MUD 7 that I'll be discussing with that board next week. So pleased to announce that we made it this far, but again, I think there's some work to do to bring in some funding partners with this, and the effort continues.
Good work on that, Jim. Very good, because I know you brought that up probably 2 years ago at Drainage Task Force meeting, and it'll definitely be a huge benefit to MUD 47. Not only the homes along there, but just the ability to get back to your house if you're in front of the Woodlands during a large rain event, and to improve the drainage on Research Forest. So thank you for all that work.
Thank you.
Here.
Okay, we'll get to some of the fun stuff. Item 15, excuse me. The SJRA water auction with the Trinity River Authority. Mr. Keeling, is this yours?
No, that
Kelly?
is actually Ed Shackelford's.
Well done.
Good
Okay.
evening. I'm trying to share my screen. Can you all see?
Yeah, we can see it. We can see it.
PowerPoint?
We can see it.
All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Trinity River water supply option that Sjra currently has.
But my screen,
It just cut off. It just sliced off. You had
Okay.
it.
it only shows your slide thumbnails.
Yeah.
Well, let me go to, let me get the right. How's that?
There you go.
There.
Okay. So I'm still learning how to do some of this high technology stuff. So tonight we're going to talk briefly about the Trinity River water supply option. Sjra has this currently. And some of the issues that are associated with this. So as you all know, the Montgomery County is growing population-wise. It's a numerous water supply strategies need to be considered. One of those is the Trinity River option. It's 50,000 acre feet. It was initiated by the Sjra GRP Review Committee in 2013. And we have a contract with TRA that has some timelines in it that require some action in the near term. And so the reason I'm bringing it to you tonight is to say, by the end of this year, we've got to make some decisions, and we're looking for input from the various entities that would benefit from this. Now, not to spoil the punchline, but the use of this water won't be for 20 or 30 years from now. But look at this population projection for Montgomery County. It's pretty significant. You know, if you look at 2020, we need about 115,000 acre feet of water. The lake will do about 100,000 acre feet. And so you can see that between the lake and the groundwater, we need more water. The option here would be to bring water in from Lake Livingston through canals and pipelines into the north end of Lake Conroe. As I mentioned earlier, it's a 50,000 acre feet per year. It's firm water. A pump station and pipelines and canals would be necessary to bring this in. Project cost, you see the number $200 to $300 million. I'm assuming that's a current number, but when we get down to it, it's going to be much more expensive. There's the option agreement. We are currently paying a fee of about $250,000 a year to maintain the option. So, well, as you can see, it's $237,500 per year. So we've got some deadlines looming. We need a service agreement with the Trinity River Authority by December 2021. And that means we're moving forward. The next step would be an interbasin transfer permit. And it says 1 to 2 million. That's on the advice of legal counsel, but we think that number could be higher. We've got a deadline of April of 2028 to convert to a water supply contract. And then if we don't take the water, it's an annual reservation fee. And what it means to you right now, the roughly $250,000 is being processed through the raw water side of the Sjra system. And so you see a pro rata of that in your GRP rate. Going forward, if for the reservation fees and all the expenses, we're talking about 2 to 5 cents on the raw water rate, anywhere from year 2022 to 2028. And the increase to you, it's initially a penny per 1,000 gallons or 2 cents per 1,000 gallons when you get to 2028. So we're talking a dime, assuming an average household is 10,000 gallons a year, or excuse me, per month. We're talking 10 cents per month to maintain this option on water. and as much as a quarter starting in 2028. So we've made the presentation to the SJRA board. They've said, go out and talk to the community and find out what they think. So we're meeting with various stakeholders and bringing this presentation to them to get their input. We've talked to a couple of people that are in our GRP, but not entities within the Woodlands. And so we do need your input. Preference is to either come and give verbal comments at an SJRA board meeting or provide written comments to the SJRA board before the end of July. And so I know I rushed through that quickly, but this is on your Google Drive, so you can actually see the presentation. We're happy to make this same presentation to the individual MUDs should you choose, but we do need input so we know whether to continue this water supply option. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Or I may drag Ronnie in to help me.
I wonder, how about your commercial users of water that you're supplying? Are they going to participate in the cost?
It would be all participants within your MUDs.
No, are your commercial people down at Baytown participating?
Right. Well, yes, they would be in the raw water side.
Yeah, I don't see any of their contributions on your slides. So when you come to the MUD, and I hope you come to MUD 1, give us an indication of that, because I am familiar with the generation of this agreement years ago and how really happy we were about it, because it guaranteed the feasibility of continuing to supply water to your commercial users as well as the MUDs.
There was a slide in the presentation that talked about the 1 and 2 cents on the raw water side. And so, yes, they are included in the numbers. Other questions?
Yeah, this is Trustee Custard. Is the 1 cent and 2 cent for the GRP rate assumed in the draft budget for fiscal year 22? So that would be an adder to the draft budget?
Yes.
Okay. And the Trinity River phase, you mentioned that is needed. I can't remember what you said in terms of timing. That is in your commentary, are you assuming that occurs after the additional planned phases to expand the surface water treatment plant, or is this instead of? How does this turn? How does this fit sequentially into the planned expansions?
This would be after all of the SJRA volume in the lake is committed, plus after the City of Houston volume is committed. So it's, as I mentioned, this would not be needed until 20, 30 years, maybe even 40 years from now, depending on how the growth in the county proceeds.
And in terms of your disclosure to the GRP participants, I'm curious which ones you've talked to so far. For example, have you talked to Conroe participants?
No, they are on the list.
When do you speak to them?
We don't have a date yet.
Okay.
The ones that we've talked to include Southern Montgomery County MUD and some other entities on the east side of the county that are not. So I misspoke. We've talked to one GRP participant and we've talked to one entity that's not a GRP participant.
If I could add, we're going to make the presentation at the GRP Review Committee meeting on the 24th of May, which would include the city of Conroe, because one of their council members is on the committee.
Ed, this is Trustee Lux. If the projections shown on your second slide are accurate, and these are, I believe they came from the Water Development Board, as you indicated. I don't think that there's any choice. Unless there's some magical source of water that is looming out there somewhere that we can pipe 100 miles from somewhere. This is the only accessible water that seems to be available. We all agree that groundwater from the Chico, Evangeline, and the Jasper are unsustainable and wrought with other issues. Unless we go deeper and try something like that, I don't know that we're going to be able to meet that demand, and all of it is in the municipal column. The others are rather static.
Correct.
So I don't know that we really have, if we are going to be good stewards of the future needs of this county and our communities, I don't think that we have a choice unless somebody can come up with a magic bullet somewhere. That
This Director Brown, Director Lux always seems to focus in on exactly what needs to be said. My question is, what do you guys recommend? You're the experts, meaning what does San Jacinto recommend? I'm going to be dead in 30 years. So what do you guys recommend? You brought this to us. What do you recommend? Approve it or not approve it?
Based on the cost, I think it is where our recommendation would be to move forward with it.
Okay, you got my vote.
Yeah,
Okay, I think this was just to expose the issue tonight, and then we're going to go to the regular meetings next week, Jim?
Yes, no definitive action was requested tonight. It's to open the discussion, review it with the MUDs, and then give some direction to the River Authority next month.
Okay, I haven't heard anybody speak against it. Is there anybody who'd like to say that it's not a good idea? Now would be a good time to bring it up.
My silence is I'm in line with Trustee Lux. Very good.
Thank you. Okay, is there no other discussion on that? So let's move on to item 16, the SJRA budget, which is presented, and then it'll be presented at the meetings next week, and then we'll have, I guess next month we have to vote on it. Is that correct?
Yes, it's for discussion purposes, review with the MUDs next week, and actually action on this is it June or July, Chris?
I think it's going to be July.
July.
Right. The MUDs will direct their trustee on how to vote in July for final approval in August.
Okay.
So this begins the
first
detailed review.
Okay.
Here's the beginning.
Chris, are you going to go through it?
Yes, sir, I am. And trying to figure out which button to push. All right. So let me know when you can see the budget presentation screen, please.
Yes.
You see it?
All right. So yeah, as mentioned, there is no action tonight. The budget process actually starts well, for us, it starts around October and then completes in August. So it's pretty much year round, but we do start presenting information in January. At this point, we've put the information together. We will go through the proposed rates and the budget as well. There is no action tonight. The severe information tonight, as well as next week. In June, if there's any questions or comments, we'll definitely go through those. In July is when the MUD's director trustee. In August is the final approval. So there's a lot of time built into this to ask questions and kind of poke around, if you will. So I'm going to kind of start this presentation similar to last year's. We've kind of flipped the presentation around. So we're going to start at the end, and then we're going to go through how we got there. I will say I have no problem going through this tonight, but if you want me just to hit the high points, which is basically the first few slides, and save the detail for next week, I can. So if any point you want to let me know to stop, just let me know. So some of the takeaways is demands are flat. So for a number of years in the Woodlands, demands were increasing on the water and the wastewater side. But over the last few years, demands have been flat. They have not been trending upwards or downwards. And so the demands that we're projecting for FY22 are the same as FY20 and 21, which is roughly 5.4 billion gallons sold and 2 of water, and then 2.9 billion gallons of sewer treated. As stated earlier, this budget does include 65% groundwater, 35% surface water. One thing to note on that blend ratio, as discussed earlier, currently the GRP Review Committee has not voted on their rates. And so at this point, we cannot give an actual rate on any increase allocation to a 50-50 blend. May 24th is when the Review Committee votes on the budget and their rate. After that information is voted on, we should have information on what a 50-50 blend would cost. As the second bullet shows, we are projecting a 5% water and wastewater increase. We'll kind of go through the budget and I'll show you some of the reasons why. Some of this is because the ongoing renewal of the aging water and wastewater system that we've all talked about quite a bit. We are proposing to increase the R&R funding by $500,000 a year. This is something that we've talked about last year during the budget, is with the increasing in maintenance needs, we're proposing to increase the R&R funding each year by $500,000 until it gets to roughly $10 million a year. Then of course, the O&M and emergency reserves are fully funded. And so what we're going to start with here is you see the proposed and the previous wholesale water rates only. So next slide after this is wastewater, but I want to take you back to FY 2017 and then bring you up to current. So what you see is the last 5 years, and then on the far right, the proposed FY 2022 rate. So you can see there's a couple of periods where we had no rate increase. And then of course we 3 to 4 to, and this year 5% rate increase. And one thing to note as we're going through the budget, that's a good point I forgot to mention. On the Google Drive is what I call the Woodlands budget package. That package has a cover sheet, a very brief table of contents, if you will. This presentation, it has an executive summary, and then it has each of the individual budgets. So the O&M budget, R&R budget, future facilities, and the bonds. That's where all the detail is. This presentation is just a high-level summary of that packet. One thing to note as you're reviewing the budget, the value of 1 penny on the water rate is roughly $54,000. So moving on the wastewater side.
Trustee Custer, a question there. Do you, in setting the, is there a standard, an index that you try to hold yourself to or compare against as you propose year-on-year increases or establish a trend? You try to peg it to inflation, any other indexes that you'd identify?
Yes, so in some aspects we do. We check the CPI for like merit increases. We do look around and see what other utilities, what the industry is looking at. We do look at CPI on like chemicals. We see what the insurance side of the world is doing. The biggest caveat to kind of indexing as well, which we're looking more into, is the maintenance side of things. We can index against other cities, but the Woodlands itself has its own issues when it comes to maintenance, you know. So that is a lot of the increases that you see. It's not so much the chemicals, the electrical. There's always an increase in fuel, it seems, but the maintenance is what usually drives the rate increases on the budget.
Chris, this is Kyle Mays.
Yes, sir.
Question for you. You mentioned, I think it was on the previous slide or maybe 2 slides before, that the budget rates were based on a 65-35 blend. Can you just comment a little bit about how 65-35 blend costs compared to a 50-50 blend cost? You know, what the numbers are, that type of thing, at least approximate?
Yes, I can to a certain degree, and I'll tell you. So when it comes to the Woodlands division, the blend ratio, it affects certain things. So in other words, at 65% groundwater, I have to run more wells. So I'm going to have more oil changes. I'm going to have more belt changes. I'm going to have more electrical usage, more chlorine and stuff like that. But I have less surface water coming in, so the surface water cost is reduced a little bit. But if I go to a 50-50, then I have more alkalinity cost increase, but less electrical, less oil changes, belt changes, and stuff like that. So it's not an even Steven swap between the alkalinity and the offset. Somewhere in the ballpark of $50,000 to $100,000 difference going between the two. Meaning, if I'm at 65-35, usually it's just a tad bit more expensive on the O&M side. But I will bring that up. That is not due actually to the maintenance and everything. That's due to the fact that the blended water rate does not entirely recoup the amount of expense that the Woodlands Division has to GRP. So the Woodlands Division on average pays GRP $1.3 million more than the pass-through amount is actually recouped from the MUDs. So that's the biggest fluctuation that I normally see with the blend ratio difference.
So it sounds like you're saying you would expect a modestly higher cost if we went to 50-50 as opposed to the 65-35 blend?
Potentially. But it's also when I'm talking moderate rate increases, and I'll back up to the water side here. When I'm looking at the end of the day, as you can see at the bottom, the value of a penny is roughly 54,000. Once I factor in the reduced electrical or the increased oil, so on and so forth, it's usually not, more than $50,000 or so, if memory serves, from the last year or two when I've looked at it. So on my side, as far as the wholesale provider, my maintenance and adjustments and everything, I'm looking at roughly 1 penny estimate. That does not include, of course, at the end of the day, the actual cost, the additional charge from GRP to go up to 50-50 that GRP would charge the Woodlands, and then of course would be passed on through the blended fee.
Could I add to that?
Please.
If y'all recall back in, I think, February, when we addressed the 50-50 blend issue, we had calculated that it would be about an additional $2.50 per month per residential customer if we went to a 50-50 blend, if that helps.
That rings a bell.
Thank you.
And that's strictly on the GRP blended rate side.
Yes, sir.
The surface water conversion fee on our bill.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is Trustee Custer. It would be interesting to know if there were any other sweet spots for blend rate that should be considered if our goal is to minimize the consumer rate. It would just be interesting to know if there was a 70-30, if there was a 40-60, any other blend ratios that should be looked at.
A 70-30 would certainly reduce subsidence.
And this is Chris. One thing that I look at from my side is it definitely does look at subsidence as well. So we can look at that. There are also effects when you're talking a sweet spot of the blended ratio. There are effects of more groundwater in the system. I'm sorry, more surface water in the system on the wastewater plants is one issue. More surface water as well. If you recall back a few years ago, there were some THM issues, which are disinfection byproducts. So when I'm looking at the actual wastewater system and then the TTHM that goes, the blended water that goes into the Woodlands Division, I'm actually looking at alkalinity, and then I'm looking at disinfection byproducts. Alkalinity is a relatively inexpensive cost in the grand scheme of things. Roughly 65% surface water, that cost is about $250,000 a year. But if I look at TTHMs, the disinfection byproducts, and I go above 50% to a 65% or a 70% surface water, the TTHMs actually increase dramatically. Basically, chlorine on organics that are naturally in the water, as well as heat, causes TTHMs to be created. There's an EPA and a TCEQ regulatory limit on that. If that's exceeded, I have to do stuff. Usually it's public notices, flushings and stuff like that. However, if that is the long-term fix, you're looking at roughly $1 million per tank in the Woodlands, which equates to roughly $17, $18 million. So that's another impact just to look at when you're talking about how the sweet spot and how high up to go with the surface water blend.
Yeah, and you know, my point of view is, you know, in a perfect world, we'd be able to look at a spectrum of, you know, absolutely maximizing retail customer value at whatever blend that is. So in other words, minimizing the retail rate by virtue of the wholesale rate and GRP to some maximal point, you know, of minimizing subsidence or whatever the standard is, and be able to pick a spot on the spectrum. I understand that right now we're kind of anchoring on 50-50 and 65-35, which are, you know, more correlated to the old DFC standards and this new 50-50 notion. And it'll be really hard to understand what might be surrounding those points on the graph without more sophisticated analysis, which I understand it sounds very manual. So maybe there's nothing to be done there.
I can take a look back and see if there's some information we have on the various blends that we've done that may be, that'll kind of give you the information you're looking for on that spectrum. See if there's anything in between those as well. So what you see on the screen right now is the previous 5 years of the wholesale wastewater rate. And then of course on the far right, just like the water slide, is going to be the proposed FY 2022 rate as well, and also a proposed 5% increase. And then just to kind of touch, this is the only GRP slide we have in the budget since we are talking the Woodlands division, but what you see in front of you at the bottom in the blue, the GRP fee, which is the surface water conversion fee, those are the rate, or excuse me, on the far right, the $3.07. That's the proposed rate that the Woodlands division customers, being we would charge the MUDs. The numbers above that is what the Woodlands division pays to GRP. So this is the rate that has, or these are the rates actually that have been proposed to the GRP review committee, and they'll be voting on May 24th, hopefully, on these rates.
I take a step backwards here. I'm just thinking about, you know, what my goal is. I'd like to see us get to a place where there's more surface water, but I understand your comment about alkalinity. When we were looking at the centralization of the waste plants, is that something where on the waste side, we could address alkalinity if we did upgrade and centralize the plants, that plan, or is that an issue that's just going to stay there all the time for us?
So all three of the wastewater plants have currently been outfitted with supplemental alkalinity to be fed. And there's a small amount you can see in the budget. I want to say around 150,000 potentially for that now. So if we do consolidate, you'll still have to have supplemental alkalinity. And that's basically because groundwater goes through all the minerals and the rocks and everything in the ground and picks up all this alkalinity. So it's naturally 400 milligrams per liter. Surface water obviously comes straight from the sky and everywhere else, and it doesn't have enough time to actually pull those minerals out. So the alkalinity is a lot lower. So where the plants are used to taking before surface water about 300 to 400 milligrams per liter of alkalinity, it's coming out of GRP about 80 milligrams per liter. And so it's basically, long story short, it's going to be something there always. So brief recap of before everything in the middle and on the left is the process that we have been through up until this point. Everything on the right is basically what we start this month and we run all the way through August. So
this is Trustee Custer, by the way, to take you up on your offer. This may be the start where the balance of your slides goes to the MUD meetings. I would suggest that. I don't know if anybody else agrees.
I agree. We're going to be looking at this a lot, right?
I'm going to be saying it a lot. So.
So Trustee Martin, just one question on it's our page 7. I don't know what number it is for you, but it's the one that has the GRP fee at the bottom for FY 2020 and then FY 2021, and it's 288 each year, and then it jumps to 307. There was a discussion from the State Water Board that we were not allowed to exclude attorney fees from the rate which we did last year. So my question is, the jump from 288 to 307, how much of that is because you've added attorney fees back into the mix?
Okay, so this is Chris again. So on the GRP fee, roughly for FY22, rounding up, it's roughly $200,000 per penny. And then the legal fees that were put back into the GRP budget was $2 million. That's of that 19 increase. Ron, correct me if my math is off.
But you're right. You're right. You're right.
Just to adding the legal fees back in.
So it's 10 cents.
So it's 10 cents. Yes, exactly.
Well,
Ron, this is Trustee Martin again. That's a non-negotiable item. What does it do? Affect bond ratings?
What do you mean?
We don't want to pay the legal fees.
Oh, unfortunately, our bond insurer will not allow that to happen. It's considered an operating and maintenance expense, and we are required to cover all operating and maintenance expense. And unfortunately, you can go, well, what if you don't do it? Well, then they would sue us. so then you get more legal fees. So
right. Okay, so even though it's in the rate, it doesn't necessarily mean we have to spend it. Therefore, it could be accrued, or not accrued, but could be reserved. In other words, if we don't spend it, then next year any potential rate increase would be mitigated. Correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right.
It would stay in the GRP
based on a forecast.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
This is Trustee, because similar to Trustee Martin's question there, I think, and I'm trying to remember because I think in all my reading about these rates, the 273 versus the 315, we get a blended 288 based on the projection and our use. That's 53% of the total is you're accruing through the surface rate fee. It looks like you're carrying that forward in your proposed 334 of it's about 53% of the total that you're looking to collect. Have you considered adjusting the groundwater fee disproportionately up?
Go ahead, and then I'll answer.
I think you know where I'm going. So, in particular, a lot of your GRP participants who are choosing not to pay it are running a tab. So I'm just wondering if there'd been any thought of adjusting that ratio between the two.
So, well, actually, that's and I have to be real careful on this. This is a point of contention about one of the lawsuits, okay? And our contract clearly states that what has to happen is that the cost has to be equitable between the groundwater pumpers and the surface water users. And that equitable part is by receiving surface water, you don't have to pay for wells to pull water out of the ground, treat it, and put it in a ground storage tank. Okay, there's a delta there. We have to estimate what that delta is, and that has to be the difference. There can't be any other factors that are involved in calculating that delta.
Okay, so your analysis would suggest that's a flat increase year on year because you're applying the same ratio, it looks like.
Well, it's not a ratio, it's 42 cents. We've determined that the difference that delta is the difference in cost is 42 cents, and that stays the same.
Okay. And that determination is in fact what is translating into the delta for any surface water ratio that the Woodlands would choose, just to be clear.
Yes, sir.
So is everybody fine with me shutting this down?
Probably good there, Chris.
All right.
Okay, to be continued. Moving on to item 17. Wastewater treatment plant. One.
Me again.
Chris.
All right, are you able to see my screen?
Yep.
All right. So this is an update on the projects called the Woodlands Wastewater Treatment Facility Number 1 Improvements, short name 10-man. This is the design for the permanent 10-man installation that was discussed earlier this year, late last year or so. And what we want to do is we just kind of bring up PER is just about done. It's actually in the draft mode at this point in time. And so just some information wanted to bring back with this. So just a brief recap, these are TCEQ received odor complaints. On the left, this is actually pulled from their report. So on the left is all their various jargon, but on the right actually shows you all the various complaints they've received since November of 2019. So TCEQ has logged, and this goes through January at this, I'm sorry, through March at this point in time, according to the information left, but 57 complaints, 20 actual on 20 different days since November of 2019. And so what has been done?
Sorry, Trustee Custer, can I just point of clarity? Forgive me, I'm the one asking all the questions. Are these represented as unique emails? Could they be from, the same email 10 times? How would you describe that?
This is from TCEQ. And so what we've asked TCEQ before is these are not always unique emails. Sometimes they're multiple emails from the same person over the 24-hour period. Some are obviously unique, but in some cases they said they have received duplicate complaints over that 24-hour period. So one thing prior to the 10-man design being approved is Kimley Horn did a study of wastewater plant 1. So the 10-man, through that study, 3 potential sources of odor were identified. Aeration basins at the wastewater plant, digesters at the wastewater plant, and then the 10-man itself. The 10-man project only addresses one of those 3 potential sources, which is, of course, the 10-man as it used to look prior to April of 2020 is in the middle. So the preliminary engineering report that was done for the 10-man, there's a lot of information, and I'll show you what the report is later in the presentation, but there's 2 main things that Kimley Horn looked at, or I'm sorry, 1 main thing, which is how to filter the air. So they looked at a fan and they looked at piping and stuff like that, but after the air was pulled out of the sewer system, how was it treated before it was released to the environment? Those 2 items that they looked at were biofilters, which is a biological, basically filter with some type of biological material on the inside. Then a carbon filter, which as you can see on the left is kind of like a pellet. Best way to explain it is like kind of like charcoal, if you will. Both of which have pros and cons, which have been listed here. The report goes into greater detail about some of those pros and cons, cost, and so on and so forth. So one thing just to kind of recap so far as well and go in a little bit more detail, up at the top of this slide, you'll see expenses. And so these are expenses that have been approved up until today. So on the right, the total approved spend you can see is just a little bit over $511,000. It's important to note that as of today, you can see where it says on the left, 10-man design, remainder design at $110,000 has not been spent. Everything above that has, so you're roughly at $400,000 has been spent today on the various odor issues at wastewater plant 1. What you see on the bottom is Kimley Horn's recommendation on the 10-man. This goes into a little bit of detail, but I'll keep it high level. So what Kimley Horn looked at between the bio-trickling filter as well as a carbon filter, that was one aspect of how to filter it. The other aspect is, what does the airflow need to be? This is the fan test that was discussed 2, 3, 4 months ago, and what exactly was the fan test. So the fan test airflow rates that you see on the left, they were tested between roughly 6,000 CFM and 15,000 CFM. After getting all the different studies done, putting out pressure monitors, H2S monitors, and actually seeing which fan actually pulled the airflow from which areas and which area is the best, Kimley Horn settled on recommending a airflow rate of 13,000 CFM. For comparison purposes, the 10-man, as it was a year ago, was about 6,000 CFM. So their proposal's twice the airflow. The reason being is the way that the sewer system is at Wastewater Plant 1, the path of least resistance is straight. The Lakeside Cove community, my language is a dog leg or a Y off to the side. So in order to actually start pulling some amount of air from the Lakeside Cove community, you had to up the airflow rate, which is how they got to 13,000 CFM. So 13,000 CFM does come, anything above that does come with an issue, potential issue that is. At 13,000 CFM, the actual airflow, the vacuum that's created may dry out P-traps within the homes themselves. It'll have a vacuum on it, so if you try to fill up your P-trap, it'll constantly be vacuumed out over time. So that is something to be cautious and knowledgeable of. The other thing that you see here is you see 5 different manufacturers of biotrickling filters, cost ranging from capital cost that is about 1.2 to 2.2 million. And of course, next to that, you see the 20-year O&M cost. At the final right, you see total present worth value of about 1.6 to about 2.4. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be working with Kimley Horn to take this list of 5 manufacturers down to 3. The River Authority does not sole source items like this. And so we're not going to identify just one manufacturer and put that into a proposal to be designed around. We're going to look to take this list of 5 down to 3 by doing site visits, talking reference checks, so on and so forth, and actually talking to the people who own them, operate them, and maintain them to see which of those 3 is the best of the best, if you will. So kind of summarizing this a little bit and going down into a different path as well. The 10-man only addresses one of the 3 identified sources. So the 10-man, when it's redesigned and put in, this is not a solve all fix the problem. There are still 2 other sources that are potential odors. The 10-man was originally installed for Grover's Mill, North Millbend area only. If you go back to the conversation about the 6,000 CFM versus 13,000, that's why it had to be up to pull from Lakeside Cove area. And there's been no odor complaints from Grover's Mill, North Millbend area since the 10-man was removed in April of 2020. Historically, we've received odor complaints around when the weather gets cold. The colder it got, the more complaints we'd seem to get for some reason around that area. As everybody is well aware, the winter storm came through in February, and we did not have any odor complaints during that time period. Now, one thing to note at this time is even though the design of the the design of the 10-man was underway, we've still been looking for other alternatives and solutions for the odor sources. And when we're looking at what the 10-man does and how we could also alleviate that issue, we've been looking at some biological additives. There's also some chemical additives, but the biological plants don't always work together very well and causes other issues. So in the course of going through and looking at the various different biological additives, we came across 2, one that we evaluated for a little bit, but caused actual issues in the collection system and potential issues at the plant. But we've come across one that we think may be a good solution. It's called Superall. This product's used, recommended by the engineering firm IDS. They use it in some of their mud districts. Mud 386 and 387 uses it at some of their lift stations. Infomark, which is I believe the firm that actually reads your meters currently used to be Severn Trent. They use it at some of their locations. And it has two benefits from talking to those individuals. One is odor control, and the other is grease abatement. And I'll tell you, as a person who's been in the industry for over 20 years, I'm highly skeptical of putting any material into the wastewater to do anything. However, when talking to these various individuals that have used this before, they said it actually did solve their problems and it did work. And so we don't see any, let's say, downside besides the financial impacts. So with your approval, what we'd look to do is actually start a trial run of the superall process. The superall process is basically a chemical, it's a liquid that you inject into the sewer. And we'd be looking to do it for up to a year. The reason we'd be looking for do it up to a year is because, one, we don't know exactly where to put it in. We have recommendations from the vendor, which we'll go with, on which manhole to put it in, which lift station, so on and so forth. But it's also a seasonal thing. As you can see, and we talked about on this slide, the third bullet, we've received no complaints even through the coldest of times. But right now, if I start injecting this solution, and I usually get odor complaints around the winter time, I need to go through the winter season as well. So when I'm talking about this, the cost of this on the high side from the vendor is estimated at $6,000 a month. So for a 1-year trial or up to a 1-year trial, you're looking at roughly $72,000 of expenses. It is not in the FY21 budget. It is also not in the FY22 budget. But if you approve it, I could actually, since the budget is still drafted and just presented, I could add it to the FY22 budget and go forward with it. So what I'm looking for is some general direction on the superall product from y'all. Is if that's something y'all would like me to move forward with and actually start the trial run on the basis of it, or if not.
Chris, this is Kyle Mays. Are you suggesting that we try the superall chemical before you rebuild and reconnect the tin man to see if this will actually make a difference? Or are you suggesting that we do both, or what are you suggesting?
My recommendation is, while we're still quite a few months out from actually finishing the design of the tin man, and actually let me back up, that's a very good point. What I'm recommending is, while we're doing the final design of the tin man, we try the superall. See if it solves the problem without having to invest $2 million in capital. At the same time, this PER that you see on the screen right now, this report, there's a link that you can get the actual report at, just FYI, it's 122 megabytes. This report is going to be discussed with the Lakeside Cove community, and we're going to be seeking their input over the next couple months. And the PER is going to stay draft until we receive input buy-in from the MUDs, Lakeside Cove. And we also have time to do the field investigations, reference checks, and whittle that list of 5 down to 3 potential vendors. So in that time frame of roughly 2 to 3 months, we'd be looking to try the superall, start the process, and see if it shows some promise. If it does, we can continue to the trial. We can move it around. But if not, we're seeing nothing coming from it, or we're seeing issues at the wastewater plant, then we would stop it.
And do you intend to also try this chemical at wastewater plant 2 and or plant 3?
So this product that we have, the superall product, works best from what we've seen. And we tried this before at the wastewater plant, and it doesn't work because of the large amount of doses that is needed. So this product is more of a collection system type product from what we've seen. So at wastewater plant 2 and 3, it's actually at the wastewater plant. And we don't think it would actually work nearly as well due to the amount that you would actually have to inject into the system.
Thank you.
This is Scott, Trustee Custer. In the event that it works, how would you solve your second source requirement? Is there something else like this on the market?
That is a hurdle I will have to cross with our purchasing department in state law. Right now, since we have evaluated multiple in the past, we have not actually issued an RFQ. We've just done some initial legwork out there, but the initial draft, just see if it works, is going to be the first thing. But our purchasing department is pretty good, so we'll see if there's some way, if this product does work, if there is a comparable item out there to use.
Seems pragmatic.
Chris, this is Trustee Lux. If you're looking for guidance or direction, I feel as though investing $72,000 for over a year is far better than proceeding with a tin man that only addresses one of 3 identified sources. We don't know the doggone thing is even going to work when we get done with it. That's kind of a punch in the stomach, I think. So it probably will. I'm sure Kimley Horn's a great firm and they do good things, but there's no guarantees. And if we can abate this problem with this kind of an expenditure, I believe we'd be foolish not to investigate it. That's my opinion. Thank you.
I agree. This is Kyle Mays. The other issue is time. It will be months and months, if not more than a year, before a new tin man would be in place, whereas you could put this Super-All in the system within weeks.
This is Ron Kutchy, trustee at MUD 6. Neil Gaynor and I, Neil, president of MUD 6, had the opportunity to meet virtually yesterday with Jim Stinson, Ron Kelly, and Chris Meeks on this subject. And having worked myself for 25 plus years in industrial water treatment and pollution abatement, I was also somewhat skeptical about the chemical alternative. What I do like about going forward through a trial basis right now is that we're 80% into a $500,000 expenditure on the PER for a new biotrickling filter alternative, but something that'll amount to roughly $1.5 to $2 million plus high annual operating expense. The chemical does have some good credits to it. It's got a number of users that Chris was able to refer to, and $6,000 a month is not extraordinary from an operating expense standpoint. The question is the ability to be able to monitor and measure the performance of the chemical as to H2S and volatile organic carbon, and that's before the trial begins, while the trial is continuing, after the trial is discontinued temporarily, warm weather and cold weather. If the SJRA has got the ability to do that, I would highly recommend we consider the trial as an alternative, perhaps long-term solution to a strong capital expense option otherwise. Thank you.
And this is Chris Meeks. That is a great point. That's one thing I did neglect to mention, that entirely on board with that. We need to see if this is going to work. And there's two ways we do that. One is by the monitoring and the sensors that are put out there. The second, of course, is what I call the nose test, which is the number of people that tell us if it's working or if it's not. So we have purchased some monitors last week that we do plan to deploy in various manholes prior to the study, so we can actually see what the H2S level is pre, and then actually when we start putting in the chemical in different locations to see what it actually comes out to after the dosing is done.
This is Kyle Mays. The other point to consider is that we're looking at this issue of consolidating wastewater treatment plants at a different location, in which case wastewater treatment plant number 1 could actually go away. And then there would be 2 million plus wasted if we build the tin man. And that's just one more reason to try this chemical solution in the near term.
This is Ron Kutchy. I agree with you, Kyle.
Okay, I think we can act on this tonight. So if anybody would like to make a motion, go ahead. It looks like.
This is Ron Kutchy. I'll be glad to make the motion to consider really the simultaneous completion of the PER through Kimley Horn, which will take several months, and at the same time we conduct a chemical trial of the Super-All product. We should be able to know something, I would think, by the fall, or for sure in the wintertime, prior to making a serious capital decision on the Kimley Horn recommendation.
Second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? If not, Brian, would you make a roll call vote, please?
This is Brian. If there's no further discussion on the item, we'll call the vote. Ron Wilson, how do you vote?
Aye.
Kyle Mays,
Aye.
Paul Martin,
Aye.
Hartley McIntosh,
Aye.
Ron Tucci,
Aye.
Jan Price,
Aye.
Scott Custer,
Aye.
Laura Norton,
Aye.
Bob Lux,
Aye.
motion carries.
Okay, thank you, folks. We can move on now to item 18. General Manager update on enhancing social media public information.
In your packet, there is a February, March, and April summary of our enhanced social media and public education effort. I'll be happy to respond to any questions you may have about that document.
When or could it be appropriate for the communication from Woodlands Water to say there's a group called stopoursinking.com? Because you guys have a lot of reach.
Yeah, I think unless we have an objection, we could include that in some of our social media posts. Yeah.
I know that the stopoursinking.com steering committee is very focused on just keeping our objective at getting public comment. There are no other agenda. There is no other agenda behind that group.
Let me review that topic and discuss it with our consultants, and I'll report at the MUD meetings next week.
Okay. Anything else on this item, Jim? Okay, item number 19, discussion, consider item reviewing Woodlands Water operational efficiency.
Maureen has put together a nice one-page summary document in your packet on, I think, page 27 regarding tasks that she's been working on with staff for the last several months, if not longer. So please review those, and if you have questions, we'll address those.
Okay, thank you, Jim. That may be the end of it. Do we have items for the future agenda?
Trustee Martin, sorry to bring this up at this late hour, but I think it's important. I'd like an item to address the following. Due to the extreme teamwork of Woodlands Water staff during COVID-19, where over 30% of the in-house staff were infected and had to isolate, and the voluntary incentive to move systems and hardware home and seamless transition, and most recently, the outstanding performance by staff during Ice Storm Uri in February of 2021, some working 24-hour shifts and the same and invaluable service to all of the residents. I would like to consider a proclamation of appreciation from the board to the staff and a one-time stipend to all full-time and part-time employees not to exceed $700 each.
Okay, I guess that's something we can put on the agenda for next time, Paul?
That's my suggestion, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other suggestions? Okay, I have a suggestion. I'd sure like to get these meetings back in person. So my question to the attorney is, when can we do it, Brian?
This is Brian. We can, well, I guess we can cover that as though this is under the attorney report. We have not received any updates from the governor's office on when the disaster proclamation will be lifted that suspended the in-person meeting requirements under the Open Meetings Act. At this point, you are not required to meet in person, but you do have the discretion, and it's really on a case-by-case basis among governmental entities at this point, whether they're meeting remotely or in person. I know Jim was taking a look into that. We do have some more logistical challenges than some governmental entities like cities or even the township, where there's one chamber and one governing body. Here with Woodlands Water, you have one chamber, so to speak, or meeting room, but you have a number of meetings that are conducted over a short period of time, and having those folks come in and out, I think is still a bit of a concern, and maintaining appropriate protocols in place. So it's really something I think your staff can look into from a safety protocol perspective and report back on, but you're not legally prohibited from meeting in person, but you're not at this point, you're not legally required to meet in person, which is the default, up until COVID, outside of a extremely rare emergency situation that would fall under the open meetings requirement exception.
I have to say,
Okay, so can I? Go ahead, Laura.
well, for me, it's kind of awkward because I've never met, or I don't recall ever meeting Ron Wilson, Paul Martin, Kyle Mays, and I keep reading about that audit committee. So because I got on this board later on, that's really awkward. I wonder, because you guys get to discuss a lot of things in your audit committee meetings, and I feel like, oh, I wish I had known or could call one of you to ask questions of when I see that. I would really like that, and it's awkward that I've never met you guys. Anyway, other than that, this staying at home, and I am wearing a beautiful flowing skirt. Sure, that's very convenient, and I like that, and I like the fact that our meetings are recorded, that we can share them with constituents. So I see both arguments, so maybe it's something we look into further.
And this is Trustee Cusser for additional consideration. I mean, to that point, I do think that we should at least explore, understand, and consider the possibility of recording these meetings when we do resume in person. I think that is of value and will continue to be, and will be of more value as we progress, particularly with some of the dollar figures that we're talking about here. So yeah. I think we should consider hearing recommendations on how to do that.
I once heard that the township offered their board chambers that we could use their facilities. I don't know if that invitation is still out there, but they have nice facilities.
Yeah, this is Brian. I think it's not really about the chambers themselves as much as it is the meeting schedule and having them back to back and people in and out over a short period of time. But
I wondered about the trustee. Maybe we could do a half and half with the trustees doing something and then the MUDs staying on Zoom, because you're right on about traffic. I get that. Yeah, I mean, all the wipe down you'd want to do all that. Yes.
I'll be happy.
I think this is Kyle Mays. I think it's probably worth at least coming up with some goals for when we would meet again. Is it vaccinations for a certain percentage of trustees or directors? What are going to be our particular criteria? Let's talk to the staff, and they're the ones that are, they're in that building every day, see what their opinions are. Well, we probably ought to come up with some sort of criteria for when it's appropriate to meet again in person.
Yeah, I think we can leave that up to them, Mr. Simpson, at this point.
Yeah, I'll be happy to visit with our the officers of the trustees and talk about developing something and report back next month.
Thank you, Jimmy. Okay, any other items for the future agenda? If not, let's close 7:55. Night all.
Thank you, everyone.
Ron.
Fine.